Okay, guys, so welcome back. We got Tuesday's global feedback here. So first of all, I just want to say that today's answers, your answers from yesterday, are really, really good. And most of today's lesson is more based on how to improve your answers as opposed to how to make your answers good. So normally I'm focused more on, like, let's say, like things you did wrong and how to do them correctly. But today's lesson is more focused on you've done it well and how to improve even further. So a little bit different, but the same idea again, really. So this is the question that you guys looked at. So first of all, just your strengths. I mean, overall, strengths are really good. Paraphrases were strong. The odd one or two of you tried to use synonyms that weren't accurate, but for the most part, paraphrases were strong. The length was good. Now, the reason that I'm mentioning this one is because last week your answers were far too long. We were getting up to like 220, 250 words long, stuff like that. And that was a good part of the demo lesson feedback last week was about the length. So I don't know if this question was better for it or if you reacted to last week's feedback, but the length of your essays was much, much better this time. So you're all shooting somewhere between like 170, 190 words, something like that. So much better there. Key features, you all were able to choose the key features very well. And we'll look into the overviews another bit in a second. Accuracy of data, so I don't think I saw any incorrect figures, which is rare. Usually there are some kind of confusion or like incorrectly reported figures in your essays. And this is mostly just because you're not paying attention, so like you're kind of writing down numbers but not double checking with the graph at the same time. It's an easy mistake to make, but it's something that can have a big effect on your score. So really, your accuracy of data was really, really good. I didn't notice even one error in that this week. Variety, vocabulary, and grammar. So you seem to be having good variety. Obviously there's still some mistakes with accuracy, but the variety is there, and that's good to see. But of course, remember Chris's 100% rule in that you are focusing on your accuracy more than your range. In that way, you'll get a higher vocab score. But for the most part, the range and the variety of vocabulary and grammar was appropriate for this, so that's good to see. And then just some smaller errors with accuracy. Okay, weaknesses. Now, this is what we're going to focus on for the rest of the lesson. And like I was saying earlier, this is more to do with how to improve your answer, not how to correct mistakes that you made. I think that one of the issues here was that analysing the question a bit further to help logically organise the details paragraphs would have improved your coherence and cohesion. So in your details paragraphs, the information was all there, but the order wasn't as logical as it could have been. So you answered the question well, but not as well as possible. A lot of you made no mention of Washington, D.C. or Paris, and I would agree that they weren't part of the key features, but to completely ignore them isn't the right thing to do either. So what you need to do here is, like, if you had mentioned them in the paraphrase, so if you actually gone and named the 6 cities, which it's not a great way to write your paraphrase, but at least they would have been mentioned, and the person reading the essay would have been aware that those cities were on the chart, but that there was nothing significant. Another thing you could have done is just in the overview, you could have mentioned them and just said that there was nothing significant in the figures from either Washington, D.C. or Paris, and then you wouldn't have had to do anything else with them. Or you could have just added like maybe one figure from each in the details paragraphs. Again, they weren't part of the key features, but to completely ignore them isn't exactly right either. So there should be some kind of a mention of them somewhere at some point in your essay. Logically ordering key features in the overview and not comparing like with like. So these two are kind of the same issue. So the fact that you weren't comparing like with like meant that the order of the key features in the overview wasn't logical. So that's kind of like, these are really the same point. So an example of this is an example taken from a student, but it's a typical response from a lot of you. So we have here, although London has the oldest and longest distance covered, Tokyo has the maximum number of travellers per year. So this kind of like this structure, although this happened. So that's not, usually we would use this kind of structure when you're comparing like with like. So it would be, let's say for example, we're talking about people's money. So we say, although people in London make more every year, people in Tokyo have more money saved in their bank accounts. So that's kind of like we're talking about money and money. So the issue here is that you're trying to compare something with something else that isn't really related. So it could be like, let's say for example, even though people in London live to be older and walk more, people in Tokyo travel more by car. I mean, those things, they're not related, but you're not comparing like with like. So again, you can't really use this structure or try to order the overview by just kind of forcing these together, even though they don't really belong together. So like I said earlier, you've covered the key features, you've included the necessities, but it could be done in a more logical way. So that's what we're going to look at for the rest of the lesson now. Okay, so again, that's the question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you like the annotations that I've made, and I want you to pause the video with each one and try to determine what exactly am I trying to refer to, or what am I trying to remind myself of as I'm writing my essay. So here's the first annotation. So just pause the video and tell me what are you looking at here. Okay, so I think this one should be okay. I have the oldest and the newest, so O and N. This is the longest and the shortest, and then the passengers per year, I have the most and the least. Okay, so that's basically what you had as your key features. Those 6 points is what you included in the overview as your key features. But a lot of you tried to say London was this, but Tokyo was this. But those 3 things aren't related. That was the like the name of the lesson was 1 year with random data. And the fact that they're random means that you can't really compare. This was oldest, this was longest, but this had the most passengers. They're random, so you can't compare between these categories because there is no connection between the categories. The only connection is that London was the oldest and the longest here. So that links these two together. But the fact that the date opened and how long the route is isn't connected. So like a newer city or a newer railway system is just as likely to have to have a longer route system than an old one. So the fact that they're older or newer doesn't really have any comparison or any effect on how many kilometers or how many passengers. So really they're random. So if you're trying to relate or compare the data between the categories, you can only do it by the connection of the country. Okay, so the next one then, I want you to stop, pause the video, and just consider what exactly am I trying to infer here. So what information am I looking at here? Okay, I'm going to assume that you've figured it out. If you haven't, you should pause and spend more time looking at this, because really this is, if you can figure out yourself what I'm trying to do, then you're more likely to be able to do it yourself in questions you do in the future. So let me just point out that this one represents key feature number 1, and this 2 represents key feature number 2. So what am I trying to infer here? Or what am I getting at with the arrows and the badly drawn circles here? Okay, so let me just go through with you. So I would have as my first key feature, so it's not necessarily that these are linked, but I like to just have 2 or 3 key features. So how I would do this is I would first mention Los Angeles. So this would be my overview. In my overview, so overall, Los Angeles has the newest and London has the oldest, but London also has the most railway track, or the longest or the most kilometers of railway system. So basically I'm going to link those by the fact that both of those are London. So this one is the newest, this one is the oldest, and has the most kilometers of track. Then the second key feature in my overview, I'm going to start with Kyoto in here. So the last thing I've mentioned here is the number of kilometers. So now I'm going to mention the number of kilometers again. So the number of kilometers in Kyoto was the shortest, and Kyoto also had the least number of passengers, whereas the most number of passengers was in Tokyo. So there, I've kind of linked them all together, and it's very logical. So newest to oldest, London, London, then Kyoto, Kyoto, and then from the least to the most. So it's all very logical that each one is linked to the one before, and it's very clear as to how they're all connected. And within that then, I've also done 2 from the date opened, 2 from kilometers of route, and then 2 from passengers per year. So it's very, very logical in that way. Okay, and here's the next thing that I've done, the next little bits of notes that I've made. So again, just pause the video and try to determine what am I looking at here. So I've got a 1, question mark, 2, question mark, 2, 1. So what am I looking at here? What exactly am I inferring? Okay, just in case you haven't figured it out yet, because I think it would be difficult to group these together in my details paragraphs, what I'm going to do is I'm going to group London and Los Angeles together in my first details paragraph, Tokyo and Kyoto together in my second details paragraph, and I'm not sure about Paris and Washington. So just have another little look and see, can you kind of determine why have I made these distinctions? Why am I going to do it that way? Okay, so hopefully you figured it out. Under normal circumstances, I would just follow my key features in my details paragraph, but because the data is so random and it's hard to link it together, I'm going to go with countries, with cities, just to make it a bit easier. So I'm going to go with London and Los Angeles because we have 2 superlatives, so 2 items to mention about London and 1 to mention about Los Angeles. I'm going to mention Kyoto and Tokyo because I have 2 to mention about Kyoto and 1 to mention about Tokyo. So this way, rather than focusing on the categories like I did in the overview, I'm focusing on the cities because it's going to be easier to determine, like having equal lengths. So by doing these, I've chosen 3 in each one. But now with Paris and Washington, there are no really significant figures here. So I have to try and figure out where does it make more sense to include. Now earlier on I said if you mentioned Paris and Washington DC in the paraphrase, you wouldn't need to do it in the details paragraph. Or if you mentioned that there's nothing significant for them in the overview, again you wouldn't need to do it in the details paragraph. But here I've decided that I'm going to mention them in the details paragraph. So I'm just going to do 1 in each, and I'm just going to choose 1 thing. So to help me decide where to put Paris and where to put Washington, I need to look at the 3 figures for these 2 cities in a bit more detail here. Okay, so just try to determine what have I marked here and what significance would that have on my choice. Okay, so here we can see that Paris is the second oldest, and also Paris has the second highest number of passengers per year. So that's something to take into account. And also then Washington DC, it's a very little going here. So it's the 4th oldest or the 3rd newest either way. It's got the 3rd shortest route, and also it has the 3rd least number of passengers. So there's not really much going on there. So you're just going to have to decide which one is going to be easiest to do. What I've done is I've gone with Paris as number 1, and I'm just going to mention this 1 figure. So it'll probably be something like towards the end of my first details paragraph, be something like 1 significant feature about Paris is that it had the second oldest route, the second oldest system built in 1900. And then for Washington DC, it'll probably just be the last sentence again. And it doesn't really matter which one because they're equally as insignificant. But because I'm covering mainly kilometers of route and passengers, I would just mention one of these things just to have said something about Washington, not completely ignore it. Okay. So next part of the lesson then is just kind of grammar mistakes or vocab mistakes from students writing. And as always, you are just going to look through these and try to correct them before you look at my corrections. So just pause the video and do that in your own time. Press play when you're ready to see my corrected version. Okay. So here we have London first opened the service. So here the service for the railway isn't really what we'd say. It would be the railway service for the people or something. So first opened the service is enough in the year 1863 and currently carries a total of 775, that should be million passengers per year, and also has the longest network of tracks at 394 kilometres. The next one then, London has opened its underground transportation service in 1864. Excuse me, that shouldn't be has that. It's not present perfect. That should be past simple. So London opened its underground transportation service in 1864, which makes it the oldest among the given cities. So it didn't become the oldest later on. The fact that it was open then makes it the oldest. The next one, however, Kyoto's underground railway system has the shortest length of route at 11 kilometres and the fewest travellers at 45 million. Okay, so that just needs to be simplified, and we wouldn't say least length. That's not how you would describe those. That's not the correct adjective. Regarding the oldest system, stations were opened in London, Paris, and Tokyo in 1863, 1900, and 1927, respectively. Another way you could have corrected that was if you just said, regarding the oldest systems, London, Paris, and Tokyo opened their stations in 1863, 1900, 1927, and 1927, respectively. Okay, and this is the last one then. So you need the article here. The underground railway in Kyoto opened in 1981, has the shortest route at only 11 kilometres, and also the least people utilising it with 45 million per year. Okay, so that's all for this week. If you have any questions, especially relating to how I analyse the data, please feel free to ask me in the comments under the video, and hopefully you got a lot out of this one. Okay, thank you guys.